Hi guys, thank you for tuning in. First, I want to apologize for my previous video. I had the incorrect render resolution for my FPS. So what I did for this video was I took every preset in the game and I benchmarked it between two different sets of RAM. We started out with my Corsair Vengeance 5600 megahertz DDR5 CL36 RAM, and then we compared that to the Trident 6400 megahertz DDR5 CL32 RAM. And there's some nice changes, so I'm going to go through that and show you what you can expect FPS wise. We did gain some FPS, but stay tuned and we'll get to that. So let's get started here. So I did 10 total benchmarks between the two sets of RAM, 5 for each set. So we're going to start out with the minimum preset benchmark here. So keep in mind when you select minimum, this is just for fun. Nobody's gonna be really playing in 1280p by 720, which is the render resolution right here. But just for fun, we were able to get 379 FPS average. All right, there, and our GPU temp was at 54C, and then you can see my settings down here for the GPU overclock power limit. It's an Asus TUF Gaming 3090, so power limit's kind of limited, so I can only go to 107, and that brings the temp limit to 91C. Excuse me. And our core clock 120 and memory clock 1150. So we're in a pretty warm environment in this room. There's no windows. It gets very hot. So we're kind of limited on how much we can crank the GPU up. So this is kind of like a nice safe overclock for the GPU that we kept the same throughout this testing. Um, when I do some testing upstairs with some windows open, everything like that, I can get that core clock all the way up to past 150. So the temperature in the room does make a big difference. All right, so next up on the list here, we have our basic tests on our 5600 megahertz RAM still. All right, we're on 5600 megahertz. So basic preset, 227 FPS average. All right, so this is when you select the basic preset, it brings the display resolution, the render resolution to 1440p. So this is where we start going into 1440p. Our GPU temp is 61 degrees. As a reminder, some people are confused about this. I only have one 3090. It's just, I don't know why it says 2. I only have one 3090. And as you can see, same thing. We did, looks like we added a little bit more in the core clock here, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. But yep, let's get on to the next one here. All right, this one is the balanced benchmark, the balanced preset. So 212 FPS. All right, so render resolution 1440p, 63C on the GPU, and yep, 120, 1150 on the overclock. All right, and I think this is a bug here. This refresh rate, I'm set to 165. G-Sync is off, and frames are unlimited set in the game. So as far as this refresh rate, I'm not sure why it says 59. I think it's a bug. I was having a problem with DLSS earlier. I didn't actually have that as an option, and then I restarted the game, and now I have it as an option. So I think it's just another bug. All right, and ultra settings. All right, this is once again the 5600 megahertz DDR5 RAM. Ultra preset in the game, 144 FPS. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Render resolution, 1440p. All right, and we hit 64 on the GPU, and looks like we went down a little bit on the. I think we hit an unstable, so I had to just bring it down about 50, yeah, about 50 megahertz on the clock there. Really not much of a difference at all. It's negligible, but yep. So we were able to hit 144, and yeah, pretty good. On my previous video, I had set as 195, but keep in mind the render resolution was set incorrectly, so we have now fixed it on this one. All right, guys, to finish off our last test with our 5600 megahertz RAM, we have our max FPS in 1440p, 234. So my specs on the computer, it's a 13700K. Obviously RTX 3090 here, just one. And the 13700K is overclocked via the AOIC on the Asus Strix motherboard. I have a Z690i, and the overclock, it's basically just basic overclock, and then I made a little bit of adjustment to it. I cranked it up a little bit more, but it's still kind of held back. But for these testing purposes, we just kept it right around 5.5 gigahertz all core, and then some of the cores can boost up to 6 gigahertz. So if you look over here, this wasn't in game, but I did a CPU Z test. As you can see, max temps that the CPU Z got to was 86, and then right here is the max boost. So I actually didn't hit 6 gigahertz, so 5.9. It hit 5.9 in the first 3 cores max boost, 5.7 on the next the rest of the cores, so the next 5, and then on the E cores it hit 4.4. All right, guys. So now we began our 6400 megahertz RAM test. So we are using the Trident Z5 RGB 6400 megahertz DDR5 CL32 RAM for this test, and let's get ready to it. So right away, we gained 4 FPS in our max 1440p benchmark. Okay, so we take a look here, render resolution 1440p, GPU temp 58C, and the same overclock. All right. Moving on to the minimum spec preset in game. Remember, once again, guys, this is just for fun, just to see what the highest you can get is with a minimum requirements that they set in the game. So for that, with the 6400 megahertz DDR5 RAM, we did gain 1 FPS and 55C on the GPU. Okay. So our basic test for our new RAM. All right, 228 FPS right there. This is where we start our 1440p render resolution testing. All right, GPU temperature 59C, and same thing on the overclock here. Moving on to our balanced test, we gained 1 FPS from the change in RAM. All right, and once again, 1440p, 61C on the GPU temperature, and same overclock here. Okay, this is where we got some nice changes. So 14 FPS gain in the Ultra preset in game. So I got 144 on 5600 megahertz DDR5, and I got 158 FPS with 6400 megahertz DDR5. Everything is the same. Overclock, all the settings are the same. So a 14 FPS gain, which is absolutely awesome for a RAM change. The new RAM has tighter timings. It's higher frequency. So, I was expecting to get maybe 4 to 5 FPS more, but 14 is awesome. I think we did really well there. So hopefully you guys, if you're going to upgrade your RAM, you gain some FPS like I did here. All right. All right, guys, I want to thank you for watching. And It turns out that RAM does make a difference in game. Uh, I noticed, you know, in the middle presets, not so much. It was only a 1 FPS gain, but when you start cranking up the settings, that's where you really notice the changes there. Um, I know I'm still working on the 3D Mark benchmark, but we're almost at 1,000 points more with this new RAM, and I'm just getting warmed up. So definitely a nice performance increase upgrading to 6400 megahertz. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.